The autumn wind cut through Montana like a rusty blade, carrying the scent of sage and distant snow. Clara Edison stood at the edge of the Callahan Ranch, her worn carpetbag in one hand and her pride clutched tight in the other. The year was 1878, and opportunities for a woman alone were as scarce as rain in August. You, the girl from town, the foreman, a weather-beaten man named Samuel Morse, looked her up and down with the calculating gaze of someone appraising livestock. "Yes, sir. I heard you needed kitchen help." Clara kept her voice steady, though her stomach churned. 3 days without a proper meal made even her backbone feel hollow. "Kitchen help," Morse repeated, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "Last girl ran off with a traveling salesman. You planning on staying put?" "I've got nowhere else to go." The truth of it stung worse than the wind. Behind Morse, cowboys lounged against the barn, watching the exchange with lazy interest. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with copper hair, whistled low. "Mighty pretty for kitchen work, ain't she?"
"Shut your mouth, Vince Morgan!"
Morse growled.
"Get back to the horses."
Clara felt their eyes on her like brands, but she'd learned long ago that showing weakness invited wolves. She straightened her shoulders and met Morse's gaze directly. "I can cook, clean, and mend. I know herbs for healing and can read and cipher. I'll work dawn to dusk for fair wages and a clean place to sleep." Something shifted in Morse's expression. Maybe respect, maybe just surprise at her boldness. $2 a week, meals, and you can bunk in the storage room off the kitchen. Take it or leave it." "Oh, I'll take it." As Morse led her toward the main house, Clara caught sight of another cowboy near the corral. Unlike the others, he hadn't stopped his work to gawk. Dark hair fell across his forehead as he gentled a nervous mare, his movements careful and deliberate. When he glanced up, their eyes met for just a moment, gray eyes that held something she couldn't name before he turned back to the horse. "That's Jack Roosevelt," Morse said, following her gaze. "Been back about a month. Keeps to himself mostly. You'd do well to follow his example." The kitchen was a battlefield of grease and neglect. Pots sat crusted with old food, the stove thick with soot, and mice droppings dotted the corners like punctuation marks of despair. Clara rolled up her sleeves. "Supper's at sundown," Morse informed her. 20 hungry men expecting something better than the slop they've been eating. Best get to it." Alone, at last, Clara allowed herself one moment of weakness, pressing her palms against her eyes. She'd scrubbed floors in Cheyenne, served drinks to men whose hands wandered, endured whispers and speculation about what kind of woman worked nights in a frontier town. This was supposed to be different, a fresh start. "Lord, don't let me fail now," she whispered to the empty room. By the time the sun hung low and bloody over the mountains, the kitchen smelled of fresh bread and beef stew. Clara had found root vegetables in the cellar, herbs growing wild behind the house, and enough flour to make biscuits. Her arms ached and her dress was damp with sweat. But when the cowboys filed in, they stopped short at the transformation. "Well, I'll be damned," Vince Morgan said, his eyes roving over more than just the food. "Looks like we got ourselves a proper woman at last." "Watch your language," Clara said sharply, ladling stew into bowls. "This is a civilized kitchen now." The men laughed, but they took their seats and ate with the focused intensity of the perpetually hungry. Clara moved among them, refilling bowls and coffee cups, ignoring the comments and lingering looks. She'd handled worse. It was Jack Roosevelt who caught her attention. He sat at the far end of the table, eating quietly, his eyes on his food. When she reached for his empty bowl, he pulled it back. "I can serve myself," he said, not unkindly. "You've done enough today." Surprised, Clara met his eyes. Up close, she could see the sun lines around them, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. There was something familiar about his face, something that tugged at the edges of memory. "It's my job," she said. "Maybe so," He stood, towering over her, but his movements were careful, contained. "But you look ready to drop. Sit. Eat something yourself." "The hired help doesn't eat with the men," Vince called out.
Ain't proper.
Jack's jaw tightened. "The lady's been working since noon without a break. That ain't proper either." The tension in the room thickened like cream. Clara felt the weight of 20 pairs of eyes, waiting to see what she'd do. In Cheyenne, she'd learned to navigate the dangerous currents between men, but this felt different, more personal. "Thank you for your concern," she said to Jack, her voice cool as spring water. "But I'll eat when my work is done." She turned away before he could respond, busying herself at the stove. Behind her, conversation resumed. But she felt Jack's gaze like a physical thing, weighing and measuring. Later, after the men had gone and the kitchen was clean, Clara finally sat down with a bowl of her own stew. The storage room Morse had promised was little more than a closet with a narrow cot, but it was clean and private. She'd slept in worse places. A soft knock made her jump. When she opened the door, Jack stood in the hallway, a pile of blankets in his arms.
"The nights get cold,"
he said simply, offering them to her. "These are clean, from my own bunk." Clara hesitated. In her experience, men didn't give without expecting something in return. "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment, and in the lamplight, she saw something flicker across his face, regret. Maybe, or recognition. "Because everyone deserves a warm bed and a fresh start," he said finally. "Good night, Miss Edison." He was gone before she could respond, leaving her holding blankets that smelled of leather and cedar. Clara closed the door and leaned against it, her heart beating strangely fast. Outside, the wind howled through the canyon, and somewhere a coyote called to its pack, but wrapped in Jack Roosevelt's blankets. Clara slept better than she had in months, unaware that in the bunkhouse, a young cowboy lay awake remembering another night, another town, when he'd failed to offer help to someone who needed it. The next morning brought frost and the kind of crystal-clear sky that made the mountains look close enough to touch. Clara rose before dawn, stoking the fire and setting coffee to boil. By the time the men stumbled in, rubbing sleep from their eyes, she had flapjacks on the griddle and bacon crisping in the pan. "You trying to spoil us, Miss Edison?" old Theodore Sherman asked, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Just doing my job, Mr. Sherman." But she smiled back, feeling something ease in her chest. Maybe this could work. Maybe she could build something here. The day passed in a blur of meals and chores. Clara discovered the ranch was larger than she'd realized, with over 1,000 head of cattle and contracts to fulfill back east. The men worked hard, and they ate like it. She began to learn their names, their preferences, who liked their coffee black as sin, who couldn't stomach beans, who always came back for seconds of her cornbread. It was late afternoon when trouble arrived in the form of torn flour sacks. Clara found them in the pantry, gnawed through by rats or worse, precious flour spilling onto the floor. They needed supplies for the week, and the sacks were stored on high shelves she couldn't reach. She dragged a chair over, then a crate on top of that, determination overriding common sense. The makeshift ladder wobbled as she climbed, her skirts tangling around her legs. She'd just gotten her hands on a 50-pound sack when the crate shifted. For a moment, she hung suspended, the flour sack pulling her backward. Then everything happened at once. The chair tipped, the crate crashed, and she fell. The flour sack burst against her chest, and she heard the distinct sound of fabric tearing as her dress caught on a protruding nail. She hit the ground hard enough to drive the air from her lungs, flour exploding around her in a white cloud. Through the haze, she saw her dress had torn from shoulder to waist, revealing her chemise and more skin than any decent woman should show. Footsteps pounded toward the kitchen. Of course. Of all the times for someone to come looking for coffee. Clara scrambled to hold her dress closed, flour in her hair. her eyes coating her skin like paint. Jack Roosevelt appeared in the doorway and stopped dead. His eyes went wide, taking in the scene Clara on the floor, dress torn, covered in flour like some kind of pastry ghost. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then his hands started to shake. Jack's hands trembled as he shrugged off his coat, crossing the room in 3 quick strides. He wrapped it around Clara's shoulders without meeting her eyes, his jaw clenched tight as iron. "Are you hurt?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "My pride mostly." Clara pulled the coat closed, acutely aware of how his warmth still clung to the fabric. "And we've lost a week's worth of flour. Flour can be replaced." Jack finally looked at her then, and something flickered in his gray eyes, not the hunger she'd expected from a man who'd just seen too much skin, but something deeper, more troubled. "Let me help you up." His hands were steady now as he pulled her to her feet, though he was careful to keep his touch brief and proper. Clara winced, her ankle protesting. "You are hurt." "It's nothing. I need to clean this mess before—" "Clara Edison making snow angels in my kitchen." Vince Morgan's voice cut through the air like a whip crack. He stood in the doorway, taking in the scene with obvious delight. Well, and Roosevelt playing the hero. How touching. 2 more cowboys appeared behind him, Benjamin Harrison and Grover Cleveland, both young hands eager to follow Vince's lead. Their eyes went wide at the sight of Clara clutching Jack's coat around her torn dress. "Looks like our proper lady ain't so proper after all," Vince drawled. "That dress didn't tear itself." Jack stepped forward, putting himself between Clara and the men. "She fell reaching for supplies. Anyone with eyes can see that." "Oh, I see plenty." Vince's smile was ugly. "I see a woman who knows how to get a man's attention. Bet she pulled the same tricks in whatever saloon she crawled out of." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Clara felt Jack go rigid beside her. "Oh, watch your mouth, Morgan, or what you'll defend her honor." Vince laughed. "What honor you think we're stupid? A pretty girl shows up out of nowhere. No family, no references. Desperate enough to take any job I've seen her type before." "You don't know anything about her," Jack said. But Clara heard the slight waver in his voice, saw the way his fists clenched. "Neither do you, Roosevelt, though you seem mighty eager to find out." Clara had heard enough. She stepped around Jack, flour still dusting her hair like premature snow, and faced Vince directly. "You're right," she said quietly. "You have seen my type before, the type who works honest for her wages, the type who cooks your meals and mends your clothes and asks nothing but respect in return. If that threatens you, Mr. Morgan, perhaps you should examine why." Vince's face flushed red. "Listen here, you—" "That's enough." Samuel Morse's voice cracked like a gunshot from the doorway. The foreman took in the scene, the flour, the torn dress, the tension crackling between the men. "Morgan, Harrison, Cleveland, get back to work, now." They filed out reluctantly, Vince shooting one last poisonous look over his shoulder. Morse turned to Clara. "Get yourself cleaned up and properly dressed. Supper's in 2 hours." His eyes moved to Jack. "Roosevelt, we need to talk." Jack followed Morse out, but not before Clara saw the worry in his eyes. Alone in the kitchen, she sank onto a stool, suddenly exhausted. The coat still warm around her shoulders smelled of leather and something uniquely Jack Sage. Maybe, and hoarse and honest sweat. She should have known her past would catch up. It always did. By evening, word had spread through the ranch like wildfire. Clara felt the whispers follow her as she served dinner, saw the speculation in the men's eyes. Some, like old Theodore Sherman, treated her no differently. Others watched her with new interest, as if Vince's words had given them permission to see her as something less than respectable. Jack didn't come to dinner. "Heard Roosevelt got a talking to from the boss," Vince announced to the table at large. "Morse don't tolerate fraternizing with the help, especially not the female help. Seems to me," Theodore said mildly. That a man helping a lady in distress ain't fraternizing. It's common decency. Depends on the lady, don't it? Vince shot back. Clara set down a platter of beef with enough force to rattle the table. The beef is tough tonight, much like the conversation. Perhaps both would benefit from less hot air. A few men chuckled, but the damage was done. She could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the way some of them looked at her now calculating, wondering. In a place like this, a woman's reputation was as fragile as spring ice. After dinner, Clara was scrubbing pots when she heard boot steps on the back porch. Jack stood in the doorway, hat in hand. Morse says I'm to apologize for causing a scene earlier. You didn't cause anything. Clara kept her eyes on the dishwater. I'm the one who fell. That's what I told him. Jack stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Clara, Miss Edison, what Vince said was inevitable. She dried her hands on her apron, finally meeting his gaze. Men like him always find something to say about women like me. You're not. Jack stopped, ran a hand through his hair. You don't owe anyone explanations. No, then why do you look like you're waiting for one? The question hung between them. Jack's face went through several expressions before settling on something like resignation. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I knew a girl once, back in Kansas. She worked in a boarding house. Honest work. But people talked, made assumptions. I watched her reputation get torn apart by gossip, and I didn't speak up. Told myself it wasn't my business. Clara felt her heart skip. Something about the way he said it, the careful way he avoided her eyes. What happened to her? She left town. Heard later she headed west, looking for a fresh start. Jack met her eyes then, and Clara saw recognition there, mixed with guilt. I should have defended her. Should have done something. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. Clara turned back to her dishes, needing something to do with her hands. We all have things we should have done differently. Mr. Roosevelt. Jack, he said quietly. Just Jack. Jack! She tested the name, liked the solid sound of it. Thank you for the coat, and for trying to help, but you should keep your distance. Vince is already looking for ammunition. Let him look. You don't understand. I understand plenty. Jack moved closer, and Clara caught that scent again, sage and leather and something wild. I understand that you work harder than any two men here, that you treat everyone with kindness, even when they don't deserve it, that you're trying to build something decent for yourself. And what if Vince is right? The words burst out before Clara could stop them. What if I'm not the respectable woman you think I am? Jack was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. Then I'd say you're even braver than I thought. Takes real courage to leave one life behind and start another. Clara's eyes burned with sudden tears. She blinked them back furiously. You should go. If someone sees you here. Tomorrow's Saturday. Some of us ride into town for supplies. Come with us. You need fabric for a new dress. And I need to pick up grain. Purely business. Jack! Morse already approved it. Said you earned a morning off. He settled his hat back on his head. Think about it. After he left, Clara stood in the empty kitchen, his words echoing. Takes real courage to leave one life behind. Did he know, had he recognized her from that horrible night in Cheyenne when she'd served drinks at the Rosebud, when Cowboys had gotten too rough and she'd barely escaped with her virtue intact? She remembered a dark-haired man at a corner table that night, watching but not participating. Younger then, clean-shaven, but those gray eyes. Lord help her, he knew. The next morning dawned crisp and bright. Clara had barely slept, turning over the possibilities in her mind. But when she saw the wagon loaded with supplies and Jack waiting patiently beside it, she made her choice. Purely business, she said, climbing up beside him. Purely business, he agreed, but there was warmth in his eyes. The ride to town took 3 hours through country, so beautiful it made Clara's chest ache. Rolling hills gave way to valleys painted gold with autumn grass, and the mountains stood like stern guardians against the sky. "You're not from Montana," Jack observed, handling the team with easy skill. "Illinois, originally. My parents died when I was 15. Cholera." Clara kept her voice matter-of-fact. She'd learned that sympathy could be another kind of prison. "I went to live with an aunt who didn't want me, then struck out on my own." That's young to be alone in the world. Young or old, alone is alone. She pulled her shawl tighter. "What about you, Kansas born and bred?" "Till I wasn't." Jack's hands tightened on the reins. "My father had ideas about who I should be. When I didn't match up, I left, spent 5 years working cattle drives. Learning the trade. Came here when I heard Morse was hiring." "And your family?" "Got a letter 6 months ago. Father died. Left everything to my younger brother, which suits me fine." He glanced at her. "We're both orphans of a sort." The town appeared around a bend, a cluster of buildings huddled against the vastness of the land. False-fronted stores lined the main street, and Clara could hear the tinny sound of a piano from one of the saloons. Jack pulled up in front of the general store. "I'll get the grain loaded. Take your time picking fabric." Inside, Clara found bolts of sensible cotton and wool, running her hands over the material. She was comparing prices when she heard familiar voices outside. "That's her. Ain't it the new kitchen girl?" "Pretty thing. Vince says she used to work the saloons." "Vince says a lot of things. Question is, what's Roosevelt doing bringing her to town? Man's got more sense than that." Clara's hand stilled on the fabric. Through the window, she could see 3 women from town watching Jack load grain sacks, their heads bent together in gossip. "May I help you?" The shopkeeper's wife, Mrs. Ulysses Grant, appeared at Clara's elbow. Her expression was polite but cool, taking in Clara's patched dress and work-worn hands. "Yes, ma'am. I need dress fabric, something sturdy." "Mrs." Grant's manner thawed slightly at Clara's respectful tone. "The brown wool is practical, won't show dirt." "Thank you, but I prefer the blue." Clara met her eyes steadily. "I may work in a kitchen, but I haven't given up on beauty entirely." Something shifted in the older woman's face. "No," she said slowly. "I don't suppose you have... Will you be needing thread and buttons as well?" By the time Clara emerged, Jack had the wagon loaded. He helped her up, his hand warm and steady on her elbow. "Get what you needed." "Yes." She clutched her package, aware of the eyes following them. "We should go." But Jack surprised her by steering the wagon to the small cafe at the end of the street. "Thought you might like a meal you didn't have to cook." "Jack, people are already talking." "Then let's give them something worth talking about." His jaw was set in that stubborn line she was beginning to recognize. "You deserve to eat a meal like a civilized person, not hiding in a kitchen." The cafe was nearly empty. Just an elderly couple in the corner and a traveling drummer at the counter. Jack chose a table by the window, pulling out Clara's chair. "This is foolish," she whispered. "Maybe, but I'm tired of watching you serve everyone else while you go hungry." He handed her the menu. "Order whatever you want." Clara stared at the simple list of offerings, her throat tight. When was the last time someone had cared whether she ate? When had anyone treated her like she mattered? "The beef stew is good," the waitress said, appearing beside them. She was young, with kind eyes that held no judgment. "Coffee's fresh too." They ate in companionable silence, and Clara found herself relaxing despite the circumstances. Jack had a way of making even simple things feel significant, the way he listened when she talked, how he noticed when her coffee needed refilling before she did. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said finally. Jack nodded, wary. "That night in Kansas, the girl at the boarding house, was that really why you left?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, My father wanted me to marry the banker's daughter. Proper match, good family. But I kept thinking about that other girl, how the town destroyed her for no reason except being poor and pretty and alone. Made me realize I didn't want any part of that world. So you ran. So I ran. He met her eyes. Been running ever since. I guess, till now. The weight of what he wasn't saying hung between them. Clara felt exposed, like he could see through all her careful defenses. I should check if there's mail, she said, needing to break the moment. But when they stopped at the post office, Clara immediately wished they hadn't. Vince Morgan was there, collecting a package, and his eyes lit up with malicious delight when he saw them. Well, Roosevelt's treating you real nice, ain't he? Miss Edison, just like a proper gentleman with his lady. Miss Edison is picking up supplies for the ranch, Jack said evenly. Sure she is. Vince's smile widened. Say, Clara, you don't mind if I call you Clara? You ever make it down to Cheyenne, feel like I seen you somewhere before. Clara's blood turned to ice. I've been many places, Mr. Morgan, working honestly wherever I could. Honestly? He tasted the word. That's one way to put it. The Rosebud saloon ring Annie Bell's friend of mine swears he remembers a girl there looked just like you, except she went by a different name. Jack stepped forward. That's enough. Just making conversation. Vince tipped his hat mockingly. See you back at the ranch, both of you. He sauntered out, leaving Clara feeling like she might be sick. The walls of the small post office seemed to close in. Clara, Jack's voice was quiet. Whatever he thinks he knows enough. She turned away. We should go. The ride back was silent. The easy camaraderie of earlier shattered. Clara sat rigid beside Jack, watching the landscape blur past. 3 months. She'd lasted 3 months before her past caught up. It was almost a record. As they neared the ranch, Jack finally spoke. It doesn't matter. What? Whatever happened in Cheyenne, it doesn't matter to me. Clara laughed bitterly. It will. When Vince spreads his poison, when the other men start looking at me different, when Morse decides I'm too much trouble, it'll matter then. Jack pulled the wagon to a stop just out of sight of the ranch buildings. He turned to face her fully. I was there. The words fell between them like stones in water. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. That night at the Rosebud. He continued quietly. I was passing through Cheyenne, stopped for a drink. I saw what happened. How those men cornered you, how you fought them off, how the owner threw you out for causing trouble when it wasn't your fault. You saw. Her voice was barely a whisper. I saw, and I did nothing. His hands clenched on the reins. I told myself it wasn't my business, just like before, but I've regretted it every day since. Clara couldn't breathe. He'd seen her at her lowest moment, desperate and humiliated, fighting off grabbing hands while the crowd laughed. He'd watched her flee into the night with nowhere to go. Why didn't you say something when I arrived here? Because you deserved a fresh start, without someone dragging up what you'd left behind. Jack turned to look at her then, and his eyes were full of pain. I'm sorry, Clara, for not helping then, for not speaking up, for being a coward. She studied his face, seeing the genuine anguish there. This man who'd brought her blankets, who'd wrapped his coat around her, who'd defended her against Vince. He'd been carrying this guilt all along. We've all done things we regret, she said finally. The question is what we do next. They sat in silence as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Finally, Jack picked up the reins. What we do next, he said firmly, is go back to that ranch and face whatever comes. Together, if you'll let me. Clara thought about running. It would be easier. Pack her few belongings, disappear in the night, find another town, another kitchen, another chance to pretend she was someone else. But looking at Jack's profile against the golden sky, she realized she was tired of running, tired of being alone, tired of letting men like Vince Morgan drive her from place to place. All right, she said, together. As the ranch came into view, Clara saw several figures gathered on the porch of the main house. Vince was there, talking animatedly to a group of cowboys. Their laughter carried on the wind, ugly and knowing. Jack pulled up in front of the kitchen and helped her down. His hand lingered on hers for just a moment. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "you're not alone this time." Clara squared her shoulders and walked into the kitchen to start supper, feeling the weight of watching eyes. The battle lines had been drawn. Now she would find out what she was really made of. The following days tested Clara's resolve like winter tests young wheat. Whispers followed her through the ranch like tumbleweeds, and she felt the weight of speculation in every glance. Some men, like Theodore Sherman and William McKinley, treated her no differently. Others kept their distance, uncertain. But Vince Morgan and his followers made their contempt clear in a dozen small ways, crude jokes that stopped when she entered a room, meaningful looks, chairs scraped back when she served their plates. Jack stayed close without being obvious about it. He took his meals when she was busiest, positioning himself where he could watch both her and the room. He fixed things around the kitchen without being asked. A loose board here, a stubborn window there. Their conversations were limited to necessities, but his presence was a steady anchor in increasingly choppy waters. It was a Wednesday evening when things escalated. Clara was kneading bread for the next day, her arms deep in dough, when she heard unsteady footsteps on the back porch. Vince Morgan stumbled through the door, whiskey heavy on his breath. Working late again. Clara. He leaned against the doorframe, eyes glassy. Such a dedicated little worker bee. "The kitchen is closed, Mr. Morgan. Breakfast is at dawn." "Ah, come on now. Don't be unfriendly." He moved closer, and Clara could smell the liquor sweating through his pores. "Just thought we could have a little chat about old times." Clara kept her hands in the dough, though her heart hammered. "I have nothing to say to you." "No, that's not what I heard about girls from the Rosebud. Heard they're real. Conversational." "You heard wrong." She tried to step around him toward the door, but he moved to block her. "Did I? My friend in Cheyenne. He remembers you real well. Said you wore a red dress, served drinks with a smile. Said you were real popular with the cowboys till you got too high and mighty." "I served drinks. Nothing more." Clara's voice stayed steady, though her hands trembled. "Now please leave." "Nothing more." Vince laughed, an ugly sound. "That why they threw you out for being too pure and virtuous?" He reached for her arm. Clara jerked back, leaving flowery handprints on his shirt. "Don't touch me!" "Or what you'll cry to Roosevelt, he ain't here. Sugar. Nobody is, just you and me having a friendly conversation." The kitchen door slammed open. Jack stood there, taking in the scene with one swift glance, Vince crowding Clara against the counter, her flour-covered hands raised defensively. "Step away from her, Morgan!" Vince turned, swaying slightly. "Well, look who's here. Her knight in shining spurs. Tell me, Roosevelt, she paying you for the protection or you getting other benefits?" Jack moved into the room with controlled purpose. "You're drunk. Go sleep it off." "I'm just fine." Vince gestured wildly. "Just getting to know our Clara better. Comparing notes. You might say, see, my friend in Cheyenne, he had quite a story about a girl who led men on, then cried foul when they tried to collect." "That's a lie." Clara's voice cracked. "Is it way I heard it? You were working those cowboys good till one decided he'd had enough of your teasing. Then suddenly you're all innocent and misunderstood." Jack's fist connected with Vince's jaw before Clara could blink. Vince crashed into the table, sending chairs flying. He came up spitting blood, eyes wild. "You're gonna regret that, Roosevelt." They collided like bulls, crashing into walls, overturning the butter churn. Clara pressed against the sink, watching in horror as they traded brutal punches. Jack was stronger, but Vince fought dirty elbows, knees, grabbing for anything he could use as a weapon.
Stop!
Clara grabbed a pot, ready to brain whoever she could reach first.
Both of you, stop!
More men poured into the kitchen, drawn by the noise. They pulled the combatants apart, though Vince still lunged against their hold. You think you're better than me?" he snarled at Jack. "Defending her honor. She ain't got none to defend."
Enough,
Samuel Morse shouldered through the crowd, his face thunderous.
What in blazes is going on here?
Morgan was harassing Miss Edison, Jack said, blood running from his split lip. Drunk and grabbing at her. "I never touched her," Vince protested. "Roosevelt's just looking for an excuse. He's sweet on the kitchen girl. Everyone knows it. Can't stand that we all know what she really is." Morse looked between them, then at Clara. Is this true? Was Morgan behaving improperly? All eyes turned to her. Clara felt the weight of their judgment, their speculation. She could lie, minimize it, try to keep the peace, or she could finally speak her truth. "Mr. Morgan came here drunk and made unwelcome advances," she said clearly. "When I asked him to leave, he refused. He grabbed for me. Mr. Roosevelt intervened."
Lying witch,
Vince spat. "That's enough," Morse said coldly. "Morgan, you're off this ranch at first light. Collect your pay and go."
You're firing me over her.
Vince's face twisted. "You don't know what she is, Morse, what she did in Cheyenne." "I don't care what she did or didn't do before she came here." Morse cut him off. "Here, she's been nothing but hard-working and decent. You're the one causing trouble. First light, Morgan, be gone." They dragged Vince out, still cursing. The kitchen emptied slowly, men muttering among themselves. Finally, only Clara, Jack, and Morse remained. "Roosevelt, get yourself cleaned up," Morse ordered. "Miss Edison, are you hurt?" "No, sir." He studied her for a long moment. "I run a cattle ranch, not a court of law. I judge people by their work and their character. You've shown both, but this situation," he shook his head, "it's becoming disruptive." Clara's heart sank. "Are you dismissing me?" "No, but I'm warning you both, I won't have my ranch turned into a battlefield. Whatever is or isn't between you two, keep it professional. Understood?" "Yes, sir," they said in unison. After Morse left, Clara sank into a chair. Her hands shook as the aftermath hit her. Jack wet a cloth at the pump, dabbing at his split lip. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did." He sat across from her, wincing. "I failed you once. Not again." "I'm not your responsibility, Jack, not your guilt to carry." "Maybe not, but you're—" He stopped, searching for words. "You matter, to me, not because of guilt or obligation, but because you're you, strong and kind and brave." Clara felt tears threaten. "Vince won't be the last. There'll be others who think like him, who'll use my past." "Then they'll deal with me." "You can't fight them all. Watch me." The fierce protectiveness in his voice broke something open in Clara. The tears came then, silent but unstoppable. Jack reached across the table, covering her flour-dusted hand with his. "Hey now, don't give him that power." "I'm not crying because of him." Clara turned her hand to grip his. "I'm crying because I can't remember the last time someone stood up for me, fought for me." Jack's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "Get used to it." They sat there as the kitchen settled around them, flour dust dancing in the lamplight, until Clara's tears dried and something new took root in the space between them. The next morning, Vince was gone, but his poison lingered. Clara noticed the divided camp immediately, those who believed she was a victim of harassment, and those who thought she'd orchestrated it all. The kitchen became a stage where every gesture was scrutinized. It was young Andrew Carnegie who brought her news that changed everything. Miss Clara, the boy, barely 16 and working his first cattle season, approached while she was hanging laundry. Thought you should know. Vince didn't leave quiet like. He's been in town, talking to anyone who'll listen. Says he's gonna write his friend in Cheyenne. Get proof about, well, about you. Clara's hand stilled on the clothesline. Proof. Papers or something. From the marshal, maybe. Or the saloon owner. Says when he gets it, he'll make sure everyone from here to California knows the truth. The sheet slipped from her numb fingers. Even gone. Vince could destroy her. One letter, one piece of paper confirming she'd worked at the Rosebud. And her reputation would follow her everywhere. Thank you for telling me, Andrew.
The boy shifted nervously. Miss Clara, for what it's worth, most of us don't care what you did before. You make the best biscuits in Montana, and you treat us fair. That's what matters.
After he left, Clara stood among the billowing sheets. Decision crystallizing. She couldn't run anymore. Couldn't keep pretending the past would stay buried. If Vince wanted to drag her history into the light, she'd meet it head on.
That evening, she asked Morse for permission to address the men after supper. He looked surprised, but agreed. As the cowboys filed in for their meal, Clara felt Jack's questioning gaze. She avoided his eyes, needing her courage intact. When the plates were cleared, Clara stood at the head of the room. The talk died as they realized she meant to speak.
I have something to say.
Her voice carried clear and strong. Mister, Morgan has been spreading stories about me. Some are lies, some are twisted truths.
I think you deserve to hear the real story from me.
The room was silent as a church.
My name is Clara Edison. I was born in Illinois to good people who died too young. I've worked since I was 15 in hotels, boarding houses, restaurants. Yes, I worked at the Rosebud Saloon in Cheyenne. I served drinks because I was desperate and it paid better than scrubbing floors. She saw surprise on some faces, satisfaction on others. Jack sat perfectly still, his eyes never leaving her face. I never did anything improper with the customers. Never. But that didn't stop them from trying. One night, a group of cowboys decided I owed them more than drinks. When I fought back, I was the one blamed for causing trouble. The owner fired me, said I was bad for business. I left with nothing but the clothes on my back and what little dignity I could salvage. Her voice grew stronger with each word. I'm not ashamed of surviving. I'm not ashamed of doing honest work, even in a place others look down on. What shames me is that we live in a world where a woman's worth is measured by gossip and speculation instead of her actions. Theodore Sherman was the first to speak. Takes courage to stand up like this. Miss, I respect that. Pretty words don't change facts. Chester Arthur countered. A saloon girl is a saloon girl. And a man who judges without thinking is a fool. William McKinley shot back. The girl's been nothing but decent here. Arguments erupted across the room. Clara held up her hand. I'm not asking for your approval or forgiveness. I don't need either. I'm telling you who I am, so there are no more secrets. No more ammunition for men like Vince Morgan. You can accept me or not, but I'll keep cooking your meals and earning my wages until Mr. Morse tells me otherwise. She turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. The next man who corners me in my kitchen or speaks to me with disrespect will get more than Mr. Roosevelt's fist. He'll get my skillet upside his head, that's a promise. A surprised laugh broke from someone Andrew Carnegie. She thought, and then others joined in. Not mocking laughter, but appreciation for her spirit. Clara walked out with her head high, heart pounding. Jack found her later, sitting on the kitchen steps, watching the stars. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, he said, settling beside her. Or the stupidest. Maybe both. He was quiet a moment. How do you feel? Free, Clara said, surprised to find it was true. For the first time in, maybe ever, I feel free. Some of them won't accept it. Won't accept you. I know. But I'm tired of twisting myself into shapes trying to please people who'll judge me anyway. She looked at him sideways. What about you now that everyone knows for certain I'm a fallen woman? Jack turned to face her fully. You're not fallen. You're the strongest person I know. You survived what would break most people. And you're still kind. Still good. That's not fallen, that's risen. Something shifted in the air between them. Clara was acutely aware of his nearness, the warmth radiating from his body in the cool night. Jack, I know what people will say, he continued. I don't care. I've spent too much of my life worrying about propriety and reputation. It cost me the chance to help you once. I won't make that mistake again. This isn't about making up for the past. No. He cupped her face gently. This is about the future. About the fact that I can't go a day without thinking about you. That when Vince threatened you, I wanted to tear him apart. That when you stood up in there tonight, proud and fierce, I thought my heart might burst from my chest. Clara couldn't breathe. People will talk. Let them. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I'm done living by other people's rules. The only opinion that matters to me is yours. So tell me, Clara Edison, do I have a chance? She thought about all the reasons to say no, the complications, the gossip, the uncertainty of it all. Then she thought about how he'd looked at her not with pity or desire for something broken he could fix, but with genuine admiration for who she was. Yes, she whispered. Yes, you do. His kiss was gentle, almost reverent, and Clara felt something inside her that had been frozen for years begin to thaw. When they pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Jack rested his forehead against hers. We'll face whatever comes, he said. Together. Together, she agreed. Behind them, the kitchen window glowed warm against the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests. But tonight, sitting under the vast Montana sky with Jack's hand in hers, Clara allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found her place in this harsh and beautiful land. Inside the bunkhouse, money quietly changed hands as bets were settled. Theodore Sherman pocketed his winnings with satisfaction. Knew that boy had sense, he muttered. Just took him a while to find it. Andrew Carnegie grinned. Think they know we've been taking bets? Probably not. William McKinley said, but I reckon Miss Clara will figure it out when she finds that new set of pots mysteriously appearing in her kitchen tomorrow. Wedding gift, someone asked. Getting ahead of yourself, Theodore chuckled. Let's call it an appreciation gift for the best cook in Montana, and the only one brave enough to threaten us with a skillet. The men laughed, and even those who doubted had to admit the ranch had become a livelier place since Clara Edison arrived. Whatever happened next, it would certainly be interesting. Outside, two figures sat close together on the steps, planning a future neither had dared imagine, while the stars wheeled overhead and the wind carried the promise of change across the prairie. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Clara's confession. She was rolling out pie crusts when Samuel Morse appeared in the kitchen doorway, an envelope in his hand and an unreadable expression on his face. This came for you, he said, setting it on the flour-dusted table. Clara's hand stilled. The return address was Cheyenne, Wyoming. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but she knew with cold certainty what it contained. Vince had made good on his threat. Thank you, she managed. Morse lingered. Whatever's in there, remember you've proven yourself here. That counts for something. After he left, Clara stared at the envelope as if it might bite. Her hands trembled as she wiped them clean and broke the seal. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a letter from James Garfield, the owner of the Rosebud Saloon. The second made her stomach drop an official statement from the Cheyenne town marshal. She read Garfield's letter first. To whom it may concern, I have been asked to provide information regarding Miss Clara Hayes, now using Edison. I'm told who worked at my establishment from May to August 1877. Yes, she served drinks. Yes, she was dismissed after an altercation with customers. The truth, which I was too cowardly to speak then, is that Miss Hayes conducted herself with nothing but propriety during her employment. The altercation occurred when several men attempted to force their attentions on her. She defended herself, and I, fearing for my business, blamed her for the disruption. I have regretted this injustice ever since. Miss Hayes left my employment with her virtue intact. Whatever gossip may say, James A. Garfield. The marshal's statement was briefer but no less powerful, confirming that no charges had ever been filed against her, and that the men involved in the incident had been known troublemakers. Clara sank into a chair, papers clutched in shaking hands. Vindication. After all this time. But why had Garfield written this? Why now? Clara? Jack's voice from the doorway made her jump. His eyes went immediately to her face. Then the papers. What is it? Wordlessly, she handed him the letters. She watched his expression change as he read surprise, anger, then something fierce and protective. This proves what I already knew, he said finally. What anyone with sense could see, you've nothing to be ashamed of. But how did Garfield know where to send this? Why would he? Clara stopped, understanding dawning. You wrote to him. Jack rubbed the back of his neck. After Vince left, I figured he'd try to stir up trouble. So I sent my own letter to Cheyenne, explaining the situation, asked for the truth. You had no right? I had every right. His gray eyes flashed. You're under my protection now, Clara. That means something to me, even if we have to be careful about showing it public-wise. They had been careful, painfully so. Since that night on the steps, they'd maintained a proper distance during the day, but in the evenings, when Jack would linger to help with dishes or fix something in the kitchen, their hands would brush, their eyes would meet, and the air would crackle with everything they couldn't say. I don't need protecting, Clara said, but her protest was weak. Maybe not, but you have it anyway. He folded the letters carefully. What do you want to do with these? Before the Clara could answer, commotion erupted outside, shouts, the thunder of hooves, and then Andrew Carnegie burst through the door. Fire lightning struck the north pasture, it spreading fast. The kitchen erupted into motion. Clara began filling every pot and bucket she could find while Jack ran for the door. Stay here, he ordered. It's too dangerous. Like hell. Clara was already tying her apron tighter. Those men will need water, food, bandages. I'm coming. The scene that greeted them was apocalyptic. The summer had been dry, turning the grassland to tinder. Wind-driven flames raced across the prairie like orange demons, heading straight for the ranch buildings. Cattle bellowed in terror, and men were already forming bucket brigades. We need to create a firebreak. Morse shouted over the roar. If it reaches the barn, we lose everything. Clara set up a station with water and wet cloths for the smoke-blind men. Her eyes stung and her lungs burned, but she kept working, sending Andrew back and forth with fresh water, tending minor burns, keeping the fighters going. Jack was in the thick of it, leading a group trying to save the horses. Through the smoke, Clara saw him plunge into the barn again and again, leading terrified animals to safety. Her heart clenched each time he disappeared into that hell of smoke and sparks. The roof's catching, someone screamed. Clara looked up to see flames licking at the barn's shingles. If it went, the fire would jump to the other buildings, maybe even the main house. Jack was still inside. Without thinking, she grabbed a bucket and ran toward the barn. The heat hit her like a physical wall, but she could hear horses screaming inside. Jack emerged, coughing violently, leading a mare who was wild with fear. Get back, he shouted at Clara. The roof, she pointed desperately. Jack's face went white as he saw the flames above. Everyone out now. But even as men scattered, Clara saw movement in the barn's upper window, the hayloft where Andrew sometimes snuck away to read. Andrew, she screamed. Jack was already running. He disappeared into the smoke-filled barn while Clara's heart stopped. Seconds felt like hours. The roof groaned ominously. Then Jack emerged, half carrying Andrew. Just as the roof beam cracked, they dove clear as part of the structure collapsed inward, sending a shower of sparks into the night sky. Clara dropped to her knees beside them. Andrew was coughing but conscious. Jack's shirt was singed, his hands blistered from hot metal. But he was alive, gloriously, blessedly alive. "You fool," she said, her voice breaking. "You complete fool."
Had to, he gasped. Couldn't lose anyone else to fire.
It was only later she'd understand he meant his mother, lost to a prairie fire when he was 12. Now, she just held him as the cowboys finally got the blaze under control. As the rain that had threatened all day finally broke in a deluge that finished what their desperate efforts had started. The aftermath was sobering. Half the barn was gone, along with precious winter feed. Several horses had burns that needed tending. Every man was exhausted, singed, coughing from smoke. But they'd saved the ranch. Clara worked through the night, treating burns with her herbal salves, forcing water down smoke-raw throats, making pot after pot of coffee. It wasn't until dawn broke gray and watery that she finally sat down, realizing her dress was ruined. Her hands were blistered, and she was swaying with exhaustion. Here, Mary Lincoln, the foreman's wife who'd arrived to help, pressed a cup of tea into Clara's hands. "You did good work tonight, real good work." It was the first time any of the ranch women had spoken to her directly, and Clara felt tears threaten. "We all just did what was needed." "No," Mary's weathered face was kind but firm. "You did more. I saw you run toward that barn when grown men were running away. Saw you tend those burns gentle as any doctor. Maybe I had you wrong, Clara Edison. Maybe we all did." Over the next days, as the ranch struggled to recover, Clara noticed the change. Women who'd avoided her now nodded in greeting. Men who'd whispered behind her back now looked her in the eye with respect. Even Chester Arthur, who'd been most vocal in his disapproval, muttered a gruff thanks when she tended his burned arm. But it was the conversation with Jack's father that changed everything. Abraham Roosevelt arrived a week after the fire, his face like granite as he surveyed the damage. Clara had known Jack's father owned the neighboring spread, had known their estrangement ran deep. What she hadn't expected was for the elder Roosevelt to seek her out. She was in the garden, harvesting what vegetables had survived the smoke, when his shadow fell across the plants. "Miss Edison." Clara rose slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. Abraham Roosevelt was an imposing man, tall, rigid, with the same gray eyes as his son, but none of the warmth. "Mr. Roosevelt." "I heard about the fire, about what you did." His tone gave nothing away. "I only did what anyone would." "No," he cut her off. "You did what most wouldn't, including defending my son's character when men in town questioned his judgment in associating with you." Clara's chin lifted. "Your son is the finest man I know. Anyone who says otherwise." "I'm not here to argue." Something shifted in his expression. "I'm here because I misjudged. You and my son both." He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Jack left home because I tried to force him into a life that didn't fit. Wanted him to marry for advantage. Manage the ranch my way. Be the son I thought I needed instead of the son I had. I drove him away with my pride." The words seemed to cost him. Clara waited. "Now I see him here, fighting fires, saving lives, defending what's right. I see him looking at you like his mother used to look at me, before I became the kind of man who cared more about reputation than happiness. In Mr. Roosevelt, I came to say I was wrong. About him, about you, about what matters." He reached into his coat, pulled out an envelope. "This is the deed to a piece of land. Borders this ranch to the south. 40 acres with good water and a cabin that needs work. It's yours." Clara stared. I can't accept. It's not charity, it's justice. For what men like me put women like you through. Judging without knowing, condemning without cause. His voice roughened. For what my own pride cost my son. He turned to leave, then paused. When you marry him, and you will, anyone can see that know you have my blessing. Both of you. It's 5 years too late, but it's sincere. After he left, Clara stood among the vegetables. Deed clutched in trembling hands. Land of her own, a future that didn't depend on anyone's charity or approval. The freedom she'd fought so hard for, given by the last person she'd expected. She found Jack in what remained of the barn, working to clear debris. When she showed him the deed, his face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, then something softer. The old man's trying to buy his way back into my life, he said finally. Or trying to make amends the only way he knows how. Clara touched his soot-stained cheek. People can change. Jack can grow. You defending him now. I'm defending the idea that the past doesn't have to define the future, that people can choose to be better. She smiled slightly. I should know. Jack pulled her close, not caring who might see. You've always been exactly who you are. Clara, strong and good and brave. The rest of us are just catching up. They were interrupted by a commotion outside. Vince Morgan had returned, but not alone. He'd brought 3 rough-looking men with him, and from their stance, they hadn't come for friendly conversation. Heard there was a fire. Vince called out as cowboys began gathering. Thought maybe the trash had finally been burned out. But I see you're still here. Clara. Jack stepped forward, but Clara caught his arm. My fight, she said quietly. She walked out to face Vince, back straight, head high. The deed was still in her hand, her future, her freedom, her choice. Mr. Morgan, I thought Mr. Morse made it clear you're not welcome here. Public road, Vince sneered. Besides, I brought friends who wanted to meet the famous saloon girl. Thought maybe you'd like to renew old acquaintances. Maybe earn some real money instead of playing house with Roosevelt. The insult hung in the air like smoke from the recent fire. Clara felt the tension ripple through the gathered cowboys. Jack was coiled beside her, ready to explode. But it was Samuel Morse who spoke, stepping out from the crowd. Morgan, you've got 10 seconds to get off this property. Or what you'll defend her honor to. She's got all of you fooled. No. Theodore Sherman stepped forward. She's got us seeing clear. Woman works hard, helps everyone. Risks her life for this ranch. That's all the character reference I need. Same here. William McKinley added. One by one, the cowboy stepped forward, creating a wall between Clara and Vince's group. Even Chester Arthur, his burned arm in a sling, took his place in the line. Looks like you're outnumbered, Morse said coldly. And outclassed. Get gone. And if you show your face here again, we'll introduce you to Montana Justice. Vince's face went purple, but he wasn't stupid enough to challenge 30 armed cowboys. This isn't over, he snarled. You can't protect her forever. Watch us, Jack said quietly, and something in his tone made Vince step back. After they'd gone, Clara found herself surrounded by the men she'd fed and tended and worked alongside. There were no speeches, no dramatic gestures, just nods of acknowledgement, touches to hat brims. A community closing ranks around one of their own. Thank you, she managed. No thanks needed, Morse said gruffly. Ranch takes care of its own, always has. Just took some of us longer to remember that. That evening, as Clara served supper in the makeshift dining area they'd set up while the barn was rebuilt, she found a wildflower at her place setting. Then another appeared, and another, until she realized every cowboy was bringing her flowers prairie roses, Indian paintbrush, wild daisies, rough men expressing what they couldn't say in words. You all trying to make me cry? She asked, voice thick. Just thought the place needed brightening up, Theodore said innocently. Pure coincidence, we all had the same idea. Later, as she and Jack walked along the creek in the last light, Clara reflected on the strange turns life could take. She'd come here running from her past, expecting nothing but a job and a roof. Instead, she'd found a community, a home, a future she'd never dared imagine. Your father's land, she said suddenly. We could build something there, together, a real home. Jack stopped walking, turned to face her. Is that a proposal? Miss Edison. Maybe it is, she smiled up at him. Would you say yes? I've been saying yes to you since the day you fell in my kitchen covered in flour. He cupped her face gently. Clara Edison, you've turned my life upside down in the best possible way. I'll say yes to you every day for the rest of our lives if you'll let me. Even though I worked in a saloon, even though men like Vince will always try to use it against us. Especially then. His kiss was fierce, possessive, a promise. Let them talk. We'll be too busy building our life to listen. As they walked back toward the ranch, the first stars appearing overhead, Clara thought about the letter from James Garfield still tucked in her apron. Vindication on paper, but she'd found something better vindication in life. In the respect of good people, in the love of a good man. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The barn needed rebuilding. Winter was coming, and men like Vince Morgan would always exist. But tonight, walking hand in hand with Jack Roosevelt toward the warm lights of home, Clara allowed herself to believe in happy endings. Behind them, smoke still rose from the burned fields. But come spring, that ground would be the most fertile of all. Fire had a way of clearing out the old growth, making room for new life. Clara understood that now. Sometimes you had to burn away the past to make room for the future. And what a future it would be. Winter arrived early that year, sweeping down from the mountains with a vengeance. The first blizzard struck in late October, catching everyone off guard. Clara woke to howling wind and a kitchen so cold her breath formed clouds. We need to get the cattle to shelter. Jack burst through the door, snow swirling around him like a cape. This storm's worse than anything I've seen. Temperatures dropping fast. Clara was already moving, packing food and medical supplies. How many men are going out? All of them. We've got 500 head in the north pasture. If we don't move them... He didn't need to finish. Frozen cattle meant financial ruin. I'm coming with you. Clara, no, it's too dangerous. Those men will need hot food and someone who knows how to treat frostbite. She pulled on her heaviest coat, the one Mary Lincoln had given her after the fire. We've had this argument before. Jack Roosevelt, I never lose. His protest died at the determination in her eyes. Stay close to me if we get separated in this weather. They joined the stream of cowboys heading into the white fury. The wind hit like a physical blow, driving ice crystals that stung exposed skin. Visibility dropped to mere feet. Clara kept one hand on Jack's coat, trusting him to guide them. The north pasture was chaos. Cattle huddled against the wind. Too cold to move, cowboys worked in pairs, trying to get the beasts moving toward the sheltered valley. But the animals were already starting to freeze in place. Build fires, Samuel Morse shouted over the wind. We need to warm them up enough to move. Clara set up her station in the lee of some rocks, managing to get a fire going despite the wind. She heated coffee, melted snow for water, prepared warm mash for the horses. Men stumbled in throughout the day, hands and faces dangerously white with cold. Sit, she ordered Chester Arthur, whose lips were blue. Drink this slowly. She worked tirelessly, warming frostbitten extremities, forcing hot liquids down reluctant throats. The storm raged on, and she lost track of time in the white sameness of it all. It was Theodore Sherman who brought the bad news. Young Carnegie's missing. Went after some strays and didn't come back. Clara's heart sank. Andrew was barely 17, still learning the ways of Montana weather. In this storm, I'll find him, Jack said immediately. You can't go alone, Morse protested. Can't risk losing 2 men. I'll go with him. William McKinley volunteered, but Jack shook his head. Need you here with the cattle? I know these hills. I'll find him. He was gone before anyone could argue further, swallowed by the white wall of snow. Clara forced herself to keep working, but her eyes constantly searched the blizzard for any sign of his return. Hours passed. The storm, if anything, worsened. They'd saved most of the cattle, driving them to shelter, but there was no word from Jack or Andrew. Clara kept the fire going, kept the coffee hot, kept her fears locked tight. He knows what he's doing, Mary Lincoln said, appearing at Clara's elbow with more supplies. She'd ridden out when the storm worsened, bringing food and bandages. Jack's got the best instincts of any man on this ranch. Instincts don't stop blizzards, Clara said quietly. Mary studied her with knowing eyes. You love him? It wasn't a question. Clara nodded, past pretense. More than I thought possible. Good. He needs someone strong. Someone who won't let him carry all the weight alone. Mary's weathered hand covered Clara's. He'll come back. Both of them will. But as darkness fell and the storm showed no signs of abating, even Mary's confidence wavered. Search parties were discussed but dismissed in this weather. They'd only lose more men. Clara was reheating the last of the coffee when she heard a shout, barely audible over the wind. She dropped everything and ran toward the sound. Several cowboys behind her. 2 figures emerged from the White Jack, carrying Andrew's limp form. Both were covered in ice, moving with the mechanical determination of men pushed beyond endurance. Get them inside, Clara ordered, her healer's instincts overriding everything else. Now! They half carried, half dragged them to the shelter they'd established in a line shack. Clara's hands flew as she assessed damage. Andrew was unconscious but breathing. Severe hypothermia. Jack was conscious but barely, his lips blue, ice crystals in his hair and beard. Start warming them slowly, she instructed. Too fast and we'll send them into shock. Get those wet clothes off. Wrap them in blankets. Theodore, keep that fire fed. William, melt more snow, we need warm water. She worked over them with desperate efficiency, applying everything she'd learned about cold weather survival. Andrew moaned. A good sign. Jack's eyes found hers, unfocused but aware. Found him, he mumbled through chattering teeth. Trapped. Ravine. Horse broke leg. Shh. Save your strength. Clara. His hand found hers, cold as death but still strong. Couldn't let another fire. She understood then, in his delirium. He was mixing past and present the prairie fire that took his mother, the barn fire. Now this ice that burned just as surely. He'd risked everything to save Andrew because he couldn't bear to lose anyone else to the elements. You saved him, she whispered fiercely. You both made it. You're safe now. It was a long night. Clara didn't leave their sides, monitoring breathing, checking for frostbite damage, forcing warm liquids into them when they could swallow. By dawn, the storm had finally blown itself out, leaving a world transformed by white. Andrew woke first, confused but intact. Mr. Jack, he found me. I was sure I was done for. You nearly were, Clara said, checking his fingers and toes for damage. Miraculously, he'd escaped serious frostbite. You're lucky he knew where to look. Wasn't luck. Jack's rough voice made them both turn. He was awake, color returning slowly to his face. Saw you heading toward Devil's Ravine before the storm hit full. When you didn't come back, knew where you'd be. Andrew's eyes filled with tears. You could have died coming after me. Could have. Jack's eyes found Clara's. But I had something important to come back to. The look that passed between them was so intimate that Andrew blushed and suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. Recovery was slow. Jack and Andrew both spent a week fighting off lung fever, the ranch women taking turns nursing them. Clara barely left Jack's side, spooning broth into him when he was too weak to feed himself, reading to him from the few books the ranch possessed, simply sitting with him through the long nights when fever made him restless. "You need to rest too," he told her one evening, catching her drooping over her mending. "I rest better here." She smoothed the quilts around him. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't go charging off into any more blizzards." "Only one was enough." He caught her hand. "Clara, when I was out there, thinking I might not make it back, all I could think about was you. How I'd never told you properly. Never asked." "Asked what?" He struggled to sit up, wincing. "This isn't how I wanted to do this. Had it all planned out. Romantic, proper." "Jack Roosevelt, if you're about to propose to me while you're half dead from fever and haven't shaved in a week, I'll—" "Marry me anyway." His gray eyes were serious despite her teasing. "I know I don't have much to offer. A cowboy's wages, work that's dangerous, a cabin that needs fixing. But I promise you'll never doubt you're loved. Never wonder if you matter. Never face another storm alone." Clara felt tears spill down her cheeks. "You impossible man. Of course I'll marry you, though I'm the one with land now. Remember, your father made sure of that. Then I'm marrying up in the world." He pulled her down for a kiss that was sweet despite his fever-chapped lips. "Soon as I can stand without wobbling, we'll do this proper." "I don't need proper, I just need you." Word of the engagement spread through the ranch like wildfire. The cowboys, who'd become protective of Clara over the months, subjected Jack to good-natured ribbing and increasingly creative threats about what would happen if he didn't treat her right. "Don't need to threaten me, boys," Jack said at dinner his first night back on his feet. "I know exactly how lucky I am." It was Abraham Roosevelt who surprised them again. He arrived the day after the engagement was announced, looking older and more weathered than before. "Heard my son finally showed some sense," he said to Clara when Jack was out of earshot. "Also heard he nearly died saving young Carnegie. He did what he thought was right. Like his mother that way, always putting others first." Abraham cleared his throat. "I want to. That is, I'd like to host the wedding. At my ranch. Do it proper, with all the county invited. Show everyone that I'm proud of both of you." Clara studied him carefully. "Jack might not agree. There's still hurt there." "I know. I caused it." The older man's shoulders sagged. "But I'd like the chance to start making it right. Been too many wasted years already." When Clara told Jack about the offer, his jaw tightened. "He thinks he can buy his way back." "He thinks he can show the whole county he was wrong," Clara corrected gently. "That he's proud of you. That he accepts me. Isn't that worth something?" Jack was quiet for a long time. "Finally, you really think people can change?" "I know they can. Look at the cowboys here. Look at us." She touched his face. "Your father's trying. Jack, maybe we should let him." The wedding was set for Christmas Eve. As November turned to December, the ranch buzzed with preparation. Mary Lincoln and the other ranch women, who'd fully embraced Clara now, threw themselves into planning with enthusiasm. "Never thought I'd see the day," Mary said, pinning up Clara's new dress for alterations. "Jack Roosevelt settling down, and with a woman who can match him strength for strength." "I'm the lucky one," Clara said, then gasped as a pin stuck her. "Ow!" "Hold still. This dress is going to be perfect if it kills us both." The dress was a soft blue wool, practical but pretty, with ivory buttons Jack had ordered from back east. Nothing like the finery she'd seen society women wear, but to Clara, it was perfect, honest and real, like the life they were building. 2 weeks before the wedding, trouble arrived in an unexpected form. A well-dressed woman stepped off the stage in town, asking directions to the Morse Ranch. Word traveled fast in a small community, and by the time she arrived, speculation was rampant. Clara was in the kitchen, working on the wedding cake she'd insisted on making herself. When Samuel Morse escorted the woman in, "Miss Edison, you have a visitor. Says she knows you from before." Clara's blood chilled as she recognized the woman. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, not the famous suffragette, but a woman who'd borrowed the name for her own purposes. She'd run the boarding house in Cheyenne where Clara had first worked, before everything went wrong. "Hello, Clara," Elizabeth said, her smile sharp as winter wind. You have done well for yourself. What do you want?" Clara kept her voice level, though her hands clenched in her apron. "Direct as ever. I heard through mutual acquaintances about your upcoming nuptials. To a rancher's son. No less. How wonderful." The false warmth in her tone set Clara's teeth on edge. "I thought perhaps we should discuss certain financial matters from your time in my employment. I owed you nothing when I left. Didn't you room, board, the clothes you wore?" Elizabeth's eyes glittered. "I think a successful woman like you might want to reimburse me for my investments. Say, $100. To avoid any unpleasant memories being stirred up right before your wedding." Blackmail. Plain and simple. Clara felt sick. "Get out," she said quietly. Now, no need for hostility. I'm sure your fiancé knows all about your past. But does his father, do all these nice people who've accepted you?" Elizabeth looked around the kitchen with calculated interest. "Sometimes the truth needs context, which I'd be happy to provide, for a price." "The lady asked you to leave." Jack stood in the doorway, and Clara had never seen him look so dangerous. Behind him were Theodore, William, and several other cowboys. Elizabeth's confidence faltered. "I was just—" "Attempting extortion." Jack moved into the room with controlled menace, which is a crime in Montana, one the sheriff takes real serious. "You can't prove—" "Don't need to." It was Samuel Morse who spoke now, his weathered face hard as granite. "See, we take care of our own here, and Miss Clara's one of ours. So you've got two choices. Leave now, on your own feet, or leave later, tied to your horse. Your pick." Elizabeth looked around at the wall of hostile faces and deflated. "This is a mistake. You don't know what she really—" "We know enough." Mary Lincoln interrupted, appearing with several other ranch women. "We know she works hard, helps anyone who needs it, and makes our men better than they were. That's all that matters." Surrounded and outnumbered, Elizabeth had no choice. She left with dire mutterings about consequences, but Clara barely heard them. She was too overwhelmed by the show of protection from her adopted family. "Thank you," she managed when they'd gone. "All of you." "No thanks needed," Jack said, pulling her close despite the audience. "Though I am curious about one thing. Her real name wasn't Elizabeth Stanton, was it?" Clara laughed shakily. "No, she thought it made her sound respectable. The real Elizabeth Cady Stanton would be horrified." "Good riddance to her, whatever her name," Mary declared. "Now, let's see this cake. A wedding cake needs proper attention, not drama and nonsense." As the women gathered around to admire Clara's work, she caught Jack's eye. He winked, and she knew that whatever ghosts tried to resurface, they'd face them together. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the world crystalline with frost. Clara stood in the bedroom at Abraham Roosevelt's ranch, barely recognizing the woman in the mirror. The blue dress fitted perfectly. Her hair was arranged in sophisticated curls, courtesy of Mary, and there were even small flowers woven through it, hot-housed roses from Abraham's own greenhouse. "You're beautiful," Mary said softly. "And more important, you're glowing. That's love, child. Real love." A knock came at the door. "Ladies, it's time." Clara's stomach fluttered. This was it, the moment when she'd stop running, stop hiding, stop being afraid. When she'd claim her place in the world not as Clara the saloon girl or Clara the kitchen help, but as Clara Roosevelt, wife and partner and equal. The great room of Abraham's house had been transformed. Garlands of evergreen decorated every surface. Candles cast warm light, and it seemed like half the county had gathered. Clara saw cowboys from the Morse ranch, townspeople, other ranchers all here to witness this unlikely match. But she only had eyes for Jack. He stood at the front of the room in a new black suit, freshly shaved, his gray eyes bright with emotion. When he saw her, his face transformed with such naked joy that Clara felt tears threaten. Theodore Sherman, who'd volunteered to give her away, patted her arm. "Ready, miss." More than ready. The ceremony was simple, the vows traditional. But when Jack promised to love, honor, and cherish, his voice broke slightly. And when Clara promised to stand by him through whatever came, she meant it with every fiber of her being. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Jack cupped her face gently, as if she were precious and breakable. "Mrs. Roosevelt," he whispered, "just for her." "Mr. Roosevelt," she whispered back. The kiss was sweet, thorough, and drew whoops from the cowboys until they finally broke apart, laughing. The reception was a frontier celebration at its finest. Tables groaned under the weight of food. Fiddle music filled the air, and Clara found herself passed from partner to partner as everyone wanted to dance with the bride. But it was Abraham Roosevelt who surprised her most, approaching during a quiet moment. "I owe you an apology," he said formally, "and my thanks. You've given me back my son." "He was never lost," Clara said, "just waiting for you to see who he really was." "Yes, well," Abraham cleared his throat. "I've added another 40 acres to your land, creek access and good grazing. Call it a wedding gift, or an old man's attempt at redemption." Before Clara could respond, he'd moved away, but she saw him talking with Jack later, both men's postures gradually relaxing. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning. As the evening wound down, Jack found her on the porch, watching the stars. Happy. Beyond words. She leaned into his warmth, though I keep waiting to wake up. "It's real," he assured her. "You, me, that land waiting for our house, the future we're going to build. All real." "The future," Clara repeated, then smiled. "I should probably tell you, it might be arriving sooner than expected." Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. "I mean, we might need to build that house quickly. For 3. The joy that dawned on his face was something Clara would treasure forever. He swept her up, spinning her around until she laughed and demanded to be put down. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "Our baby." "Our baby," she confirmed. "Due in summer, if I'm counting right." "Clara Roosevelt, you've made me the happiest man in Montana. Hell, the happiest man in the world." They stood there on the porch, holding each other, as their guests celebrated inside and the mountains stood eternal guard. It had been a long, hard road to this moment through prejudice and judgment, fire and ice, fear and courage. But they'd made it. "No regrets?" Jack asked softly. Clara thought of all that had brought her here, the losses, the struggles, the nights she'd thought she couldn't go on. All of it had led to this moment, this man, this future bright with promise. "Not one," she said firmly. "Not one single regret." And as Jack kissed her under the vast Montana sky, Clara knew she'd finally found what she'd been searching for all along. Not just love, though that was part of it. Not just acceptance, though that mattered too. She'd found home. Spring came to Montana like a hesitant bride, one tentative step at a time. Clara stood in the doorway of their half-finished cabin, one hand resting on her growing belly, watching Jack and the hired hands frame what would be their bedroom. The land Abraham Roosevelt had given them stretched out beyond 80 acres of possibility, bordered by a cheerful creek and sheltered by cottonwoods. "You should be resting." Mary Lincoln called from where she was helping to organize the kitchen space. She'd become like a mother to Clara these past months, fierce and protective. "I've been resting all morning," Clara protested. "The baby and I need fresh air." "The baby needs a mother who doesn't overwork herself," Mary retorted, but her tone was fond. "Sit in that chair at least. You can supervise from there." Clara compromised by settling into the rocking chair Jack had made for her, a wedding gift that had taken him months of evening work. She was 5 months along now, the sickness of early pregnancy replaced by an energy that made inactivity torture. Mrs. Roosevelt. Andrew Carnegie came running up the path, his face flushed with excitement. The boy had recovered fully from his near death in the blizzard, and now worked part-time for Jack while studying with a circuit teacher. Letter from town. Clara's heart jumped. Letters were rare enough to be events. She took the envelope with hands that trembled slightly, recognizing the careful script. It was from Susan Anthony, not the famous suffragist, but a woman she'd known in Illinois before her parents died. They'd kept sporadic contact over the years. "Good news?" Jack asked, appearing at her elbow. He was dusty from work, shirt damp with honest sweat, and Clara thought he'd never looked more handsome. She scanned the letter quickly, then again more slowly, hardly believing the words. "Susan's coming west. Her husband died last year consumption, and she's bringing her daughter. She asks if I know of any work in the area. Says she remembers I always wrote of Montana fondly. Invite her here," Jack said immediately. "We'll need help when the baby comes, and you'll want a friend nearby." Clara looked up at him, love swelling in her chest. "You don't even know her." "I know she's your friend. That's enough." He kissed her forehead. "Write back today. Tell her to come as soon as she can. Andrew can take the letter to town." This was why she loved him, this immediate generosity, this understanding that she needed more than just him and the baby to make a complete life. Some men would have been threatened by an old friend appearing. Jack just saw an opportunity to make her happy. Clara penned the response that afternoon, offering Susan a position helping with the household and the small garden they planned. The pay wouldn't be much at first, but room and board were included, and her daughter Grace, age 10, could attend the school in town. While she waited for a response, life continued its steady rhythm. The cabin grew daily, neighbors stopping by to help raise walls and share meals. Clara learned the delicate dance of being a rancher's wife, when to speak up, when to stay quiet, how to navigate the complex social waters of their small community. It was at the spring church social that she faced her first real test as Mrs. Roosevelt. She was helping serve food when she overheard Prudence Fillmore speaking to a group of town women. "Of course, we all know about her." "Background," Prudence was saying, her voice carrying that particular tone of false sympathy. "One does wonder if such women should be allowed to teach Sunday school. What kind of example does it set?" Clara's hand stilled on the pie she was cutting. She'd volunteered to help with the children's Sunday school, thinking her ability to read and cipher might be useful. She hadn't considered that her past would follow her even here. "I think," said a clear voice, "that the example it sets is one of redemption and grace. Isn't that what our faith teaches?" Clara turned to see Elizabeth Blackwell, the doctor's wife, facing down Prudence with steel in her spine. "Clara Roosevelt has shown nothing but good character since arriving here. She's helped birth babies, tended the sick, and fed more hungry cowboys than anyone can count. If that's not Christian behavior, I don't know what is." "But her past is exactly that, past." Elizabeth's tone brooked no argument. "Unless you'd like to discuss your nephew's gambling debts, or perhaps your husband's business practices during the war. We all have things we'd rather forget. Prudence." The threat was veiled but clear. Prudence's face flushed red, and she retreated into offended silence. Elizabeth caught Clara's eye and winked. Later, as Clara helped clean up, Elizabeth approached her. "Don't let the prudences of the world dim your light," she said quietly. "You've got something special. Clara, the children love you, and that's what matters." "Thank you." Clara managed through a tight throat. "I wasn't expecting women to support each other. More of us do than you might think." Elizabeth squeezed her hand. "Now, tell me about this friend who's coming to stay. Another pair of hands would be welcome at the birthing when your time comes." Susan arrived 3 weeks later on a day when the prairie was drunk with wildflowers. Clara watched the stage approach with nervous anticipation. It had been 7 years since they'd seen each other. Would they still be the friends they'd once been? She needn't have worried. Susan stepped down from the stage, thinner than Clara remembered and with new lines around her eyes. But her smile was the same. They fell into each other's arms, both crying, while Jack stood by with an indulgent expression. "Look at you," Susan said, pulling back to examine Clara's obvious pregnancy. "Married and starting a family. You've done well for yourself. Clara Edison, I mean, Roosevelt. It's been a journey," Clara admitted. "Not always easy, but worth it. Susan, this is my husband, Jack." Jack stepped forward, touching his hat brim. "Welcome, Mrs. Anthony. Your room's ready, and there's hot food waiting." Grace, a solemn-faced girl with her mother's dark eyes, hung back shyly. Clara knelt carefully, mindful of her balance. "You must be Grace. I've heard so much about you from your mother's letters. Do you like horses? We have several who love apples and gentle hands." The girl's face lit up, and Clara knew they'd be fine. Having Susan there transformed the household. Another woman to talk to share chores with, to laugh with over coffee while the men were out working. It filled a hole Clara hadn't fully recognized. Susan took over much of the heavy work Clara could no longer manage, freeing her to focus on preparations for the baby. It was Susan who was with her when the first pains came, a month earlier than expected. Jack was out checking cattle with Theodore and William, not expected back until nightfall. Clara gripped the table edge as another wave hit, trying not to panic. "It's too early," she gasped. "Babies come when they're ready," Susan said calmly, though Clara could see worry in her eyes. "Grace, run to the Lincoln place. Tell Mrs. Mary we need her. Quick now." The next hours blurred together pain and fear, and Susan's steady voice keeping her anchored. Mary arrived with Elizabeth Blackwell, the two women taking charge with an efficiency born of experience. "Early, but not dangerously so," Elizabeth pronounced after examining her. "This baby's coming today whether we're ready or not." Someone must have found Jack, because suddenly he was there, dust-covered and wild-eyed, dropping to his knees beside the bed. "I'm here," he said, gripping her hand. "I'm here, love." "You're not supposed to be," Clara managed between pains. "Men don't—" "To hell with what men do or don't do," Jack said fiercely. "I'm not leaving you." And he didn't. Through the long hours of labor, he stayed, letting her crush his hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, whispering encouragement when she thought she couldn't go on. "One more push," Elizabeth commanded. "The baby's almost here." Clara bore down with everything she had left, Jack's voice in her ear, and then a cry, thin and reedy but unmistakably alive. "It's a girl," Elizabeth announced, cleaning the baby with practiced movements. Small but perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a good set of lungs. Jack was crying as Elizabeth placed their daughter in Clara's arms. She was tiny, fitting in the crook of Clara's elbow, with a fuzz of dark hair and Jack's gray eyes. "She's beautiful," Clara whispered. "Our daughter." "What will you call her?" Mary asked softly. Clara looked at Jack, and they both smiled. They'd discussed names for months, but seeing her, there was only one choice. Hope, Clara said. Hope, Elizabeth Roosevelt, for the future we're building. The weeks that followed were a blur of firsts, first smile, first bath, first sleepless night that turned into sleepless weeks. Hope was small but fierce, demanding attention with a voice that belied her size. Clara often found Jack in the nursery at odd hours, just watching their daughter sleep. "Never thought I'd have this," he said one night when Clara joined him. "A family, a home, something worth protecting." "You always had something worth protecting," Clara reminded him. "You just had to find it." Life settled into new rhythms. Susan proved invaluable, taking over much of the household management while Clara recovered and learned the intricate dance of motherhood. Grace blossomed on the ranch, losing her initial shyness and becoming Hope's devoted guardian. It was a warm June day when trouble returned in an unexpected form. Clara was in the garden with Hope in a basket beside her when she saw riders approaching. Her blood chilled when she recognized the lead figure Vince Morgan, accompanied by several rough-looking men she didn't know. "Jack," she called, but he was in the far pasture. Only Andrew was nearby, and she sent him running for help. Vince dismounted at the garden gate, his smile unpleasant. "Mrs. Roosevelt, heard you had a baby. Thought I'd pay my respects." "You're not welcome here, Mr. Morgan." Clara stood, placing herself between him and Hope. "Now, that's not neighborly, especially when I've brought friends who've been dying to meet the famous Clara." He gestured to his companions. "Boys here heard all about you from that lady in Cheyenne, Elizabeth, whatever her name was. She had quite a story about debts owed." Clara's heart sank. Elizabeth Stanton must have found allies after being run off from the wedding. "Any debts I had were settled long ago," she said firmly. "That's not what we heard, but don't worry, we're reasonable men. I'm sure we can work out some kind of arrangement." The implication in his tone made Clara's skin crawl. Hope chose that moment to cry, and Vince's attention shifted to the basket. "Pretty little thing," he said. "Be a shame if something happened while your husband's away. Accidents happen on ranches all the time." "Are you threatening my child?" Clara's voice was deadly quiet. "Threatening, no. Just observing. Dangerous world for a woman alone with a baby." "She's not alone." Susan appeared from the house, Jack's rifle in her hands. She handled it with surprising competence. The barrel pointed steadily at Vince. "The lady asked you to leave." Susan said calmly, "I suggest you do so." Vince's men shifted nervously. One thing to intimidate a woman alone, another to face an armed opponent. "This isn't over," Vince snarled. "You can't watch her every minute." "We can try," said another voice. Elizabeth Blackwell rounded the corner with Mary Lincoln and 3 other ranch women, all armed. "Funny how sound carries out here. We all heard you threatening Mrs. Roosevelt and her baby. The sheriff will be very interested." More horses thundered up Jack, Theodore, William, and a dozen cowboys, faces grim. Jack dismounted in one fluid motion, his hand on his gun. "Morgan, last time I see you on my land." His voice was controlled, but Clara could see the rage beneath. "Next time, I won't wait for explanations." Outnumbered and outgunned, Vince had no choice but to retreat, but the look he shot Clara promised this wasn't finished. After they'd gone, Clara sank into a chair. Hope clutched to her chest. Jack knelt beside them, his hands gentle as he checked them both. "And did he hurt you, either of you?" "No. Susan arrived just in time." Clara managed a shaky smile. "Remind me to teach her to shoot properly. Her form was terrible." "My form was fine," Susan protested, but her hands shook as she set the rifle down. "Clara, who were those men? What did they want?" Clara looked around at the circle of friends who'd come to her defense again. These people who'd accepted her, protected her, made her one of their own. She owed them the truth. "It's a long story," she began. and told them all of it. Elizabeth Stanton's boarding house, the debts she'd tried to claim, the threats and manipulation. Susan's face darkened as she recognized the pattern her late husband had dealt with similar people, those who preyed on the desperate. "We need to go to the sheriff," Jack said when she finished. "File charges. Get this on record." "It won't stop them," Clara said tiredly. "People like that, they just keep coming, keep finding new ways to hurt you." "Then we keep fighting back," Mary said firmly. "You're not alone anymore. Clara Roosevelt, you've got family now. Real family, not just blood, but choice." The women stayed until Jack returned from town with the sheriff and a promise of increased patrols. That night, as Clara nursed hope while Jack cleaned his guns, she thought about the nature of family. She'd lost her blood family young, spent years believing she'd always be alone. But here in this wild country, she'd found something better, a family forged by choice and tested by fire. People who stood by her not because they had to, but because they wanted to. "What are you thinking?" Jack asked, settling beside her. "About how lucky I am. How lucky we are." She adjusted Hope against her shoulder. "She's going to grow up surrounded by people who'll protect her, guide her, love her. That's more than I ever dreamed of. She'll also grow up knowing her mother is the strongest woman in Montana." Jack said, "That she comes from stock that doesn't back down, doesn't give up, doesn't let anyone make her feel less than she is." Clara leaned into him, their daughter between them, safe for now. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Vince Morgan would likely try again, and there would be others who couldn't accept a woman with a past making a future. But tonight, in their home built with their own hands, surrounded by chosen family, Clara Roosevelt allowed herself to believe in happy endings. Not the fairy tale kind where all problems disappeared, but the real kind where love and determination and community could overcome whatever darkness tried to intrude. Hope gurgled in her sleep, and Clara smiled. Her daughter would know a different world than the one Clara had survived, a world where women supported each other, where men could be partners instead of problems, where the past didn't define the future. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But as Jack wrapped his arms around both his girls and the night settled peaceful around their cabin, Clara knew they'd face whatever came, together. The frontier was still wild, still dangerous, but it was also full of possibility. And that, Clara thought, was reason enough for hope. 3 years passed like seasons in Montana, sometimes harsh, sometimes gentle, always changing. Clara stood behind the counter of Roosevelt's Kitchen, the small restaurant she'd opened in the growing town of Cedar Ridge, watching the lunch crowd with satisfaction. What had started as a dream was now reality. 10 tables, usually full, serving honest food to cowboys, travelers, and townspeople alike. "Mama, can I help serve?" Hope tugged at her apron, gray eyes bright with 3-year-old determination. "You can help by sitting with Aunt Susan and eating your lunch," Clara said, smoothing her daughter's dark curls. "When you're bigger, you can serve all you want." "I'm big now," Hope protested, but allowed Susan to lead her to their family table in the corner. The bell above the door chimed, and Clara looked up to see a familiar figure. Her blood ran cold. Vince Morgan stood in the doorway, but something was different. Gone was the swagger, the cruel smile. He looked older, worn down, his clothes shabby. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quickly. Seeing Clara's hand move toward the shotgun she kept under the counter. I need to talk to you." "We have nothing to discuss." Clara's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "Please," the words seemed to pain him. 5 minutes, that's all I ask." Clara studied him. 3 years of running Jack's security measures had taught her to read danger, and, surprisingly, she sensed none from Vince, just a broken man carrying heavy burden. "Susan," she called, "watch the counter, and send Tommy to fetch Jack from the bank." She led Vince to the small office in back, keeping distance between them. Talk. Vince sat heavily, removing his worn hat. I came to apologize. And to warn you. Warn me about what? Elizabeth Stanton. She's coming back. Got herself a new partner. Man named John Wilkes, not the actor. Just borrows the name. They're running a scheme. Claiming debts from girls who worked in boarding houses. Saloons. Threatening to ruin reputations unless they pay. Clara's jaw tightened. Why tell me this? Vince looked at his hands. Because I helped her before. Gave her information about you. Spread those stories. I was angry, stupid. Wanted to hurt you because... He trailed off. Because I rejected you. Because you saw through me, he corrected. Saw what I really was. A bully, a man who mistook fear for respect. He met her eyes then. I've had 3 years to think about that. Lost my job, my friends, my reputation. Turns out when you build your life on being cruel, you end up alone. Clara heard Jack's quick footsteps, knew he'd burst through the door, ready to fight. And this sudden conscience of yours, what prompted it? My daughter. Vince pulled out a worn photograph of a young girl. She's 15 now, lives with her mother in Denver. She's started working in a hotel, and men there. They look at her like I used to look at girls like you. It made me see... He couldn't finish, but Clara understood. Sometimes it took personal stakes to develop empathy. Jack entered then, hand on his gun, but Clara raised a calming hand. Mister, Morgan was just warning us about Elizabeth Stanton's return. Jack's eyebrows rose, but he trusted Clara's judgment enough to listen. Vince repeated his warning, adding more details, dates, places, names of other women targeted. They'll be here within the week, he finished. They know about your restaurant, your success. Figure you'll pay well to protect it. Let them come, Jack said grimly. They'll find a different welcome than they expect. Vince stood to leave, then paused at the door. I don't expect forgiveness, don't deserve it, but I wanted to try to make one thing right. He looked at Clara. You're a good woman. Always were. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. After he left, Jack and Clara stood in silence for a moment. You believe him? Jack asked finally. I believe people can change. Clara said, sometimes it just takes longer for some than others. They prepared carefully. Jack alerted the sheriff a new man, Rutherford Hayes, who took such matters seriously. Clara warned the other women in town who might be targets. Susan drilled with a shotgun until her aim was true. But when Elizabeth Stanton arrived, she came with subtlety, no dramatic confrontation instead. She took a room at the hotel and began spreading poison quietly. Whispers at the general store. Concerned conversations with prominent citizens, always prefaced with, I hate to speak ill, but... Clara first noticed the effects when her regular customers began declining. Orders for pies from the church social were suddenly canceled. Women who usually chatted at the counter now hurried through their meals. She's turning the town against you, Susan reported after a trip to the mercantile. Telling everyone you owe her hundreds of dollars, that you ran out on debts, that you're not the respectable woman you pretend to be. Then we fight back with truth. Clara decided she did something that would have terrified her younger self. She called a town meeting. Standing before the assembled citizens in the church hall, with Jack beside her and Hope on her hip, she faced her accusers. Elizabeth Stanton sat in the front row, dressed in false finery. Her new partner beside her, a oily man whose smile never reached his eyes. Many of you know me, Clara began. You've eaten at my table, trusted me with your celebrations and sorrows. Some of you have heard recent stories about my past. I am here to tell you the truth. She told them everything. Her parents' death, her desperate search for work, her time at Elizabeth's boarding house, leaving out nothing but softening the worst details. Yes, I worked in a saloon. Yes, I served drinks to survive. No, I never did anything improper, despite what's been suggested. And no, I don't owe Elizabeth Stanton a single cent. She's trying to blackmail me. Pure and simple.
Lies. Elizabeth stood dramatically.
This woman owes me for room, board, clothes.
Then produce the receipts. Judge Julius Grant interrupted from his seat. If there's a legitimate debt, there'll be paperwork. Elizabeth faltered.
Well, I don't carry such things with me.
Because they don't exist, Clara said firmly. What exists is a woman who preys on the desperate, who uses shame as a weapon. I'm not ashamed anymore. I survived. I built a life, a business, a family, and I won't let anyone tear that down with lies. Pretty speech. John Wilkes stood, his voice smooth as oil. But reputation matters in a small town, even if the debts can't be proven. Can you afford to have your history constantly discussed? Perhaps a small payment would make us go away. That's extortion, someone called out Andrew Carnegie, now a young man working at the bank. That's business, Wilkes corrected. Unless Mrs. Roosevelt would prefer we stay in town indefinitely. I'm sure her customers would love hearing about her saloon days with every meal. It was Theodore Sherman who stood then, old and weathered but still commanding respect. I've got something to say. The room quieted. Theodore had been in the area longer than anyone, his word carrying weight. I knew Clara Edison when she first came to these parts, watched her work 18-hour days without complaint, saw her risk her life in a fire to save others, witnessed her stand up to bullies and help anyone who needed it. He looked around the room. Every person here has a past, things done from necessity, choices made in desperation. What matters is who we choose to be now. Mary Lincoln stood next. Clara Roosevelt delivered my grandson when the doctor couldn't come, sat with me all night, saved that baby's life. That's who she is. One by one, people stood. Elizabeth Blackwell, who spoke of Clara's kindness to the sick. William McKinley, who told how she doctored his horse when he couldn't afford the veterinarian. Even Prudence Fillmore, who'd once led the gossip against her. I was wrong, Prudence said simply. I judged without knowing. Clara's shown more Christian charity than I ever have. The tide had turned. Elizabeth Stanton's face grew red, then white. This is ridiculous. You're all being fooled. The only fool here is you, Sheriff Hayes said, standing with his hand on his gun. I've got 3 other towns wanting to talk to you about similar schemes. You can leave Cedar Ridge tonight, or you can leave in chains. Your choice. Elizabeth and Wilkes left that night, but not before one final confrontation. Clara was closing the restaurant when Elizabeth appeared at the back door. You think you've won, she hissed. But women like us, we don't get happy endings. You'll see, that man will leave you, or die, or find someone younger. That daughter will grow up to despise you when she learns what you were. This town will turn on you eventually. They always do. Clara looked at the bitter woman before her and felt only pity. The difference between us, Elizabeth, is that I learned to stop hating myself. I hope someday you can do the same. Elizabeth left without another word, and Clara never saw her again. That night, as Clara tucked Hope into bed, her daughter asked, Mama, why was that mean lady saying bad things about you? Clara chose her words carefully. Sometimes people are hurt inside, and they try to hurt others to feel better. It doesn't work, but they keep trying. But you're not hurt inside. Not anymore. Sweet pea, I have you and Papa and all our friends. That healed any hurt I had. Later, she found Jack on the porch, watching the stars. Long day, he said, pulling her close. Long but good. Clara leaned into his warmth. Did you see their faces, our neighbors? Our friends, they stood up for me. Jack, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. You earned that. Every meal served with kindness. Every hand extended in help. Every moment you chose to be better than your circumstances, it all mattered. They sat in comfortable silence, the night sounds of the prairie around them. Inside, their daughter slept safe.
Tomorrow, the restaurant would fill again with neighbors who'd chosen community over gossip.
I love our life,
Clara said softly. Even the hard parts.
especially the hard parts.
They make the good parts sweeter. Jack kissed her temple. Then here's to more of both. Together. Together, Clara agreed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The stars wheeled overhead, constant as hope, bright as dreams made real. In a small town on the edge of forever, a woman who'd started with nothing had built everything not alone, but with the help of those who'd learned to see past the surface to the soul beneath. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was real. 20 years had painted silver in Clara's dark hair and etched lines of laughter around her eyes. She stood in the doorway of Roosevelt's kitchen, now expanded to include a small inn upstairs, watching the morning bustle of Cedar Ridge. The town had grown with the railroad, bringing new faces and opportunities, but the heart of it remained the same. "Mama, the wedding cake needs your approval," Hope called from the kitchen. At 23, she was the image of Clara in her youth, but with Jack's steady confidence. She'd returned from teaching college in Denver to help with the restaurant, and Clara suspected to be near young Franklin Pierce, the new bank manager who couldn't seem to stay away from Roosevelt's kitchen. Clara examined the 3-tiered creation her daughter had crafted.
"It's perfect, sweetheart. Mrs. Coolidge will be thrilled."
"Speaking of weddings," Hope said casually, not meeting her mother's eyes, "Franklin asked Papa for permission to court me properly." And Clara kept her voice neutral, though her heart sang. "Papa told him he'd have to ask you. Said you're the one who really runs this family." Hope's smile was rueful. "He's right, isn't he? Your father and I are partners," Clara said diplomatically. "But yes, I may have opinions about who courts my only daughter." Before Hope could respond, the bell chimed and Susan entered, her hair now completely gray but her spirit undimmed. Behind her was Grace with her own daughter, little Anna, just 5 years old. "The conquering heroine's return," Susan announced. "We've successfully negotiated the purchase of the old Morrison place for the women's shelter." Clara embraced her oldest friend. The shelter had been Susan's dream for years, a place where women in difficult circumstances could find safety and support. Clara had quietly funded much of it, remembering her own desperate years. "How's Jack taking the news?" Susan asked, knowing Clara's husband had initially worried about the venture. "He's coming around, especially after Judge Grant agreed to serve on the board." Clara smiled. "Sometimes men need to hear things from other men." Speaking of men, Grace interjected. "We passed Vince Morgan on the way here. He asked me to give you this." She handed Clara an envelope. Inside was a brief note and a bank draft for $50. "For the women's shelter. It's not enough to make up for the past, but maybe it can help someone's future. V.M. Asterisk." Clara stared at the note, remembering the broken man who'd warned her about Elizabeth Stanton all those years ago. He'd rebuilt his life slowly, working as a farrier, keeping his head down and his manner humble. This was the first time he'd reached out since then.
"Will you accept it?"
Hope asked, reading over her shoulder.
"Every dollar helps someone."
Clara decided,
"Yes, we'll accept it."
The lunch rush brought familiar faces and new ones. Clara moved through the dining room, greeting customers, solving small problems, the rhythm as familiar as breathing. She paused at a corner table where 2 young women sat nervously, their clothes travel-worn and their faces cautious.
"First time in Cedar Ridge?"
Clara asked gently. The older one, perhaps 19, nodded. "We're looking for work. Heard this was a good town for, fresh starts." Clara recognized the look in their eyes, the careful words. She'd worn that same expression once. "I'm hiring," she said simply.
"Room and board included. Can you start tomorrow?"
The relief on their faces was payment enough. Hope would train them, as Clara had trained dozens of young women over the years. Some stayed, some moved on, but all left with skills and confidence and the knowledge that someone believed in them. "You can't save them all," Jack said that evening as they walked along the creek that bordered their property. Even at 60, he moved with the easy grace of a man comfortable in his skin. "I don't need to save them all," Clara replied. "Just one at a time." He squeezed her hand. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" "Only every day for 23 years. They paused at the small cemetery on the hill. Abraham Roosevelt's stone stood solid and dignified. The wounds between father and son healed before the end. Beside it, smaller stones marked losses. Mary Lincoln, taken by pneumonia 5 winters past. Theodore Sherman, who died as he lived, trying to break a horse at 81. "Do you ever regret it?" Jack asked suddenly. "The life we built, it hasn't always been easy." Clara thought of all the struggles, the lean years when the restaurant barely broke even, the influenza that almost took Hope when she was 7, the flood that destroyed their first barn, the gossips who never quite let her past go. Then she thought of the victories, Hope's diploma from Teachers College, the young women who'd found new lives through their employment, the shelter about to open, the community that had become family. "Not for a moment," she said firmly. "Every challenge taught us something. Every setback made us stronger." Even Prudence Fillmore's temperance campaign that tried to ban coffee as a stimulant. Clara laughed. "Especially that. I've never sold so much coffee as when she tried to forbid it." They were still chuckling when they heard horses approaching fast. Andrew Carnegie, now the town's mayor, reined up hard. "Clara, thank God. There's been an accident at the construction site. The new hotel scaffolding collapsed. Doc Blackwell needs help with the injured." Without hesitation, Clara hiked up her skirts and mounted behind Andrew. Jack was already running for his own horse. This was what community meant, dropping everything when neighbors needed help. The scene at the construction site was chaos. Men lay groaning among the wreckage, while Dr. Blackwell, Elizabeth's son, trained back east, worked frantically. "Clara, thank heaven," he called. "I need someone who isn't squeamish. Can you handle suturing while I set bones?" Clara was already rolling up her sleeves. "Tell me what you need." They worked through the night, Clara's steady hand stitching wounds while young Dr. Blackwell handled the more complex injuries. Susan and Hope arrived with supplies, turning the hotel lobby into a makeshift hospital ward. It was dawn before the last patient was settled, exhausted. Clara sat on the hotel steps, blood on her apron and aches in every joint. "Mama," Hope sat beside her, offering a cup of coffee. "You were amazing, the way you just knew what to do." "Experience," Clara said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "When you've lived through enough emergencies, you learn to stay calm and useful." "Is that what I should tell Franklin, that I need more experience before considering marriage?" Hope's voice was carefully casual. Clara studied her daughter, intelligent, educated, with opportunities Clara had never dreamed of at that age. "What do you want me to tell you?" "To wait, to follow your heart, to be practical." "I want you to tell me how you knew Papa was worth the risk." Clara thought back to a young cowboy with gray eyes and gentle hands, who'd seen her at her lowest and offered blankets instead of judgment. "I knew because he saw me, not what I'd done or where I'd been, but who I was trying to become. And instead of trying to change me or save me, he just stood beside me." "Franklin sees me," Hope said softly. "Even the parts I try to hide, the ambition that isn't always ladylike, the opinions that aren't always gentle." "Then perhaps you have your answer." Later that morning, Clara reopened the restaurant despite her exhaustion. The injured workers needed feeding, their families needed comfort, the town needed its gathering place. She was surprised when Vince Morgan appeared at the kitchen door. "Heard you were up all night helping," he said gruffly. "Thought you might need extra hands today." Clara studied him older, grayer, but with something like peace in his eyes. "Can you wash dishes?" "I can learn." So Vince Morgan spent the day in Clara Roosevelt's kitchen, washing dishes and hauling water, while the woman he'd once tormented served food to the hungry. If anyone found it strange, they kept it to themselves. Cedar Ridge had learned that redemption came in many forms. As evening fell and the rush finally slowed, Clara found herself standing in her empty dining room, surrounded by the life she'd built. Tomorrow, the women's shelter would officially open. Next month, Hope would likely announce her engagement. Next year, who knew what changes would come? "You look thoughtful," Jack said, appearing with a fresh pot of coffee. "I was thinking about that scared girl who fell in a pile of flour all those years ago," Clara admitted. If someone had told her she'd end up here respected, secure, loved, she'd never have believed it. "Good thing she didn't need to believe it," Jack said. "She just needed to keep going, one day at a time. With help," Clara added. "Always with help." They stood together, watching the sun set over their town, their home, their life. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was real and honest and theirs. "Ready for whatever comes next?" Jack asked. Clara took his hand, work-worn and strong, fitting perfectly in hers. "With you always." The door chimed, bringing new customers, new stories, new chances to extend the grace she'd been given. Clara smoothed her apron and went to greet them, carrying forward the lesson she'd learned in the hardest possible way. Everyone deserved a second chance. Everyone deserved to be seen for who they were becoming, not just who they'd been. And sometimes, in the most unlikely places, with the most unlikely people, you could build a life worth living. The prairie wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying the scent of possibility. And in Roosevelt's kitchen, Clara Edison Roosevelt continued to serve more than food, she served hope, one plate at a time. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Friends, I'm curious, where in the world are you listening to this tale of Clara and Jack's journey? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts about their story. If you enjoyed this Wild West love story, please consider subscribing to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like, and don't forget to hit that hype button to help more people discover these tales from the American frontier. Your support means everything and helps me continue bringing these stories to life. Until next time, partners.